Hello everyone, Professor Squatch here with an update on the Pokemon Isle of Armor DLC releasing this week for Pokemon Sword and Shield. Let's get into it. So the news site for gaming IGN got a 30-minute preview of the story and gameplay of the Isle of Armor DLC releasing for Pokemon Sword and Shield this week. There's a lot of good information in here. I want to cover a little bit of it now before we get too deep into it. Do know that this is covered by them. This was not gameplay that they had access to. Game Freak and the Pokemon Company sent them a 30-minute video through a Zoom meeting or something like that and allowed them to ask some questions, but that's about it. So let's get right into it. So one of the first things that they point out in their hands-off demo is that they battled Pokemon around level 60 in the Isle of Armor expansion, but that level 60 Pokemon they were battling was the same as their highest level Pokemon in the trainer's party. Now, it was a demo, so we don't really know what that means, but apparently the person from the Pokemon Company confirmed that the teams will scale to match your team of level 100 Pokemon. What does that mean? So in Pokemon Sword and Shield, which has been out since November, a lot of people have level 100 Pokemon, including myself. Most of my championship team is level 100. I was really worried coming into this, and if you watched my video last week about predictions about the Isle of Armor DLC, I said that I was worried that the challenge would not be there, that you would just go through and sweep through it with your level 100 team. So I was hoping they would either restrict you to only using Pokemon that are found in the Isle of Armor, or to the specific team that they give you until you complete the story. But what they're actually doing is even better. It's going to scale up based on the level of Pokemon you have. A lot of people are theorizing that it's based on the number of badges you have, but it actually turns out it's going to be based on the level of Pokemon. At least that's what early indications are. We won't know the final details until Wednesday, but we'll get there. But not only will you be encountering Pokemon and battling Pokemon that are the same level as you, you can actually get to the Isle of Armor within the first few hours of the games. So for example, my Pokemon Shield playthrough that I'm doing with a shiny only team, I have only just gotten to the wild area. Apparently, once you get there in the main story of the game, you'll be able to access the Isle of Armor if you purchased the DLC, meaning you don't have to beat the game to get there, which is just phenomenal. So if you're playing in a later playthrough, you're just like, I wanted to wait till new content came out in the game or some more of my favorite Pokemon were added in the DLC, you'll be able to play rather immediately and get the legendary Pokemon and use the legendary Pokemon through the rest of the main playthrough in Pokemon Sword and Shield. That's pretty cool. We don't know what the limits are on that, or if you'll be allowed to use the legendary Pokemon or not, but my assumption would be that, yeah, you can get Kubfu, evolve it, and use it through your main playthrough. So whether you've just started or you've already completed every post-game activity and have a level 100 Pokemon, all the expansion pass stuff, they're going to match your Pokemon's level, including the Crown Tundra too, which they're saying here. Hopefully that means they got confirmation on that. We don't really know yet. As of now, they're not sure whether the DLC areas will continue to scale or if they will be locked to your level when you first visit. So meaning, will Pokemon levels change if you come in with a level 100 team, leave and come back with a level 15 team? Will they rescale based on that? I would assume not. I would assume if you have a level 100 Pokemon and you've been there with it, then that's going to be the highest you can encounter. What does that mean for catching though? I don't know if the wild Pokemon are going to be level 100. I mean, it'd be pretty silly to catch a level 100 Pokemon that can still evolve, which is definitely the case with like Scyther and a few like Slowpoke, even like the Galarian Slowpoke. It'd be a little weird to catch it at level 100 and be like, well, normally they would evolve through other means in an earlier level. We'll see how they handle that though. So the next thing to cover is the wild area size, or at least the Isle of Armor size. So they're not calling the Isle of Armor a wild area. It's very similar to the wild area that you'll have the free roaming camera and you'll be able to encounter Pokemon in the wild, and you'll have raid dens and everything like that in the Isle of Armor. Apparently though, the size, which I predicted would be smaller than the wild area, is actually roughly the same size as the wild area, meaning there will be a lot to explore, but it's not a whole lot. You'll be able to get through the entire island in a single day, I'm sure. Whether or not you'll be able to find all the Pokemon in a single day is yet to be determined, considering there's a lot of Pokemon in the wild area in the base game that are based off of weather patterns in the main game. So if you have to wait for the weather to change, which means either changing the clock on your Nintendo Switch and seeing what the weather is the next day, or, you know, just waiting it out until the next day if you don't want to mess with your system's clock, you might not be able to catch all the new Pokemon that they, or new reintroduced Pokemon that they bring into the game through this DLC in one single day, but we'll see how that works. But what they have added, though, is more diverse terrains on the mainland. There's coastal beaches, swampy marshes, lush forests, gloomy caves, and even deserts. And that's just a part of the short tour, and it sounds like that might not have been all of it. The camera swept over each spot, creating a panoramic event in their video, so I think that's more of a trailer type thing and not really a gameplay thing. And it looks like as soon as you get to the island, you will be able to explore without having to progress the story, which is just fantastic. If you're like, I want to find all the Pokemon first before I progress the story, that's a good thing to do. In my opinion, I think I'd rather do the story first and then explore after. I like doing the exploration stuff after the fact. But I'm assuming a part of the story is going to be traversing through the island anyways, and you'll do a little exploring as a part of the story, kind of naturally anyhow. There are a bunch of micro areas with little environmental touches like logs or trees that weren't really there, part of the mainland wild area. So I think we're going to see a little bit more design to it, but I don't think the graphics are going to be any better, really. The cool thing I noticed here is they also saw Pokemon interact with their surroundings in ways that they hadn't before. So, for example, they saw a Pokemon on a tree branch in the forest. They didn't show how you could interact with it in order to battle and catch it, but it'd be pretty cool to look up at a tree and see like a Noctowl sitting in it, or to walk to a log and have a Pokemon come out of it or something like that, as opposed to the random pop-in effect that's been in the game since release that a lot of people felt took away from the immersion of the Pokemon world. It'll be pretty cool to see how they have the various Pokemon hidden throughout in the little environmental things that you might not notice right away without looking a little bit closer. A lot of, or at least their prediction is that you would be able to get them out of the trees or wherever by just whistling at them. I don't think there's going to be a lot of this in the new Isle of Armor wild area, but it's kind of cool to see that they're trying to progress forward a little bit. They also note that they saw a massive Whalelord in the water from the beach, so I don't think you could see Whalelord in the wild in the main part of the game. You can catch a Whalmer, it's pre-evolution, in like a pond in the wild area, which is really weird because it takes up most of the pond. But here you'll be able to see pretty much a full-size, possibly full-scale Whalelord in the ocean, which is pretty cool, as it's a really large Pokemon, and a lot of people complain that like in the battles, Whalelord isn't up to scale. It looks smaller than some other Pokemon, which is just unrealistic, according to the actual size that the Game Freak has stated is Whalelord's metrics. So that's pretty cool. Looks like it might just be a wild encounter, not a part of the story, but we'll see. They did ask, and this is kind of interesting to me because I had a bit of a concern listed in my video last week too about whether or not this Isle of Armor expansion could have been released from the beginning. So along those lines, IGN asked if the inclusion of old Pokemon, as in returning Pokemon coming to the game that weren't a part of the initial release, is because of player feedback, the hashtag bring back national dex trend and all of that it's been occurring for forever, and people want all the Pokemon available to be in the game so you can either catch them or transfer them in through Pokemon Home, as they've been building a collection for forever. But it looks like apparently they've been working on the Isle of Armor expansion here before Pokemon Sword and Shield even released, which is not uncommon with Game Freak. Game Freak tends to work on the next games just before the release of the first games occurs. So a good example of that is Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon was being worked on before Pokemon Sun and Moon even released. They already knew what they wanted to do. They already had the plans for it. They just kind of split their time until Pokemon Sun and Moon fully released, and then they focused fully on the effort of development. So they've already started on this. Now, the problem with that to me is they've had this content planned before the game released, meaning they've always intended to have it, which could mean it might have even been possible to try to get it ready for the initial release so that we had something more to do after we beat the main game. Or they could have released it a little bit sooner. I don't know what their time frame is, but who knows? Apparently they've been working on it for a while. Maybe it was a lot of work, but if it ends up not being much in terms of progressing the actual feel and playability of the game, it's probably something they could have tried to squeeze in the initial release and then focused on bettering the game from there. We'll have to see though. I still think that's a big concern is this going to be enough content in this first DLC expansion to really make me feel like it could have been included in the initial game, or they just wanted to do something little before they have a big expansion come out in the fall. So in the demo, they got to see 30 minutes of the story as well. Introduced the 2 rivals that you have in Sword and Shield. In Sword's version of the DLC, you get Clara, and Avery comes in the Shield expansion. Mustard is the, of course, person that we've been introduced to. That's the head of the dojo. His wife apparently is named Honey, so it's Honey and Mustard. So, real funny there, Game Freak. There's some other NPCs as well that call the Master Dojo on the island of our Isle of Armor their home, which is kind of cool. More NPCs is never a bad thing. They got to see the Clara Rival as a part of the demo, which is interesting. Apparently she's a self-interested, mean girl type, but her antics are amusing. Nintendo Life's kind of video that they released on their statement about this was that she was kind of annoying. She's very over the top, which we've had too many characters like that in Pokemon games already. So I don't know. We'll see if we enjoy the person or not. We don't know anything about what her signature Pokemon are. There's a lot of rumors out there about her headband looking like a possible Galarian Dustox. We don't know. Once you're in the dojo, though, after a quick battle, you're presented with a choice and the introduction of a move tutor who will accept the Armorite ore that was mentioned in the trailer and information from last week or 2 weeks ago now. You pay this Armorite ore to use the new move tutor to learn some moves. So that's interesting. We'll have to find out how common Armorite ore is. It can be most likely only found on the Isle of Armor, but who knows? And then Mustard explains that the dojo's apprentices must complete 3 trials in order to earn the dojo's sacred armor. So that's where the Isle of Armor thing comes in. There's some armor that you're going to be retrieving, apparently. One of the challenges includes collecting max mushrooms, which are used to create the max soup that was revealed in that trailer 2 weeks ago, which unlocks the ability for a Pokemon to Gigantamax, which we're thinking we're going to be using to get our starters to get their unique Gigantamax forms. Hopefully also to get other Pokemon that you just haven't had the chance to catch through max raids, like Corviknight, Colossal, Duraludon, all those guys. They only showed 1 trial, and they can't reveal what it is yet, so we'll figure out what that is. Hopefully, when the DLC releases, it's not too long to get to that. Apparently, it's sort of like mini games that you might have encountered, similar to like Pokemon Sun and Moon's Island challenges, which weren't that great in my opinion. But it's apparently a little less involved. So it sounds like it's not even going to be that hard to do, and they're going to be probably quick, and it's probably going to be a lot of cutscenes, which I'm not thrilled about, but we're going to get what we get. It's also worth mentioning that they got to see Kubfu briefly. They didn't really give too many details about that. This whole paragraph here is honestly information that we've known about since the DLC was first announced back in January, essentially. So who knows? They got to look at one of the towers, but it wasn't really much of a look at it. There are customizable bikes now. They didn't see any menus for this, and they couldn't give them any additional details yet, but they got 2 different bikes with different trails, or like, I guess, particle effects that occur when you use the speed boost, for example. So right now in the game, when you use your speed boost, you get some electricity that kind of shows up around the entire bike. But apparently you'll be able to customize this similar for any of you that may play the game Rocket League, how you can customize your boost trails in that game. You'll be able to similarly customize the boost trails on your bike in the DLC. So beyond that, they said they enjoyed catching a wide variety of new Pokemon, and some of their new or favorite Pokemon are returning, which is kind of cool. Who knows what that person's favorites are, though? Kind of hard to tell. They didn't really, I guess they're not allowed to give any details on what other ones there are. We'll figure that out. They're hoping the story is robust on its own and that it doesn't rely on catching Pokemon as a way to artificially pad this playtime, but who knows? I kind of want to stick with some of my predictions there, which is going to be, you're going to do the story. It's going to be 4 to 5 hours long, and most of the rest of it is going to be Max Raid Den, figuring out what Pokemon are available through those. There's also apparently a side quest of finding Digletts, like a lowland Digletts in the Isle of Armor, which is kind of cool. We'll have to see what that turns out to be. Apparently there's about 150 of them. We'll see how long that is. There's apparently other side quests, which is kind of cool too, so that you can do them separate from the main Isle of Armor story. A little something extra to do. Hopefully it's not like, boom, you're done within one day and it's, hey, I experienced the DLC and now I pretty much don't have to touch this game again until the fall in November when they release the next DLC. I want this to be something that's replayable. I'm worried though it's going to be that 4 to 5 hours of story. You're going to go around and collect the new 100 and some Pokemon that they put into the game. Maybe they'll add a few other new ones that they haven't showcased outside of Galarian Slowbro. I don't know. There's a lot of rumors around that aren't confirmed yet. We don't have to wait long to find out, thankfully, but it's not going to be long. You're only going to be able to catch Pokemon and have max raids after you're done with the story, and that's going to be about it. I'm hoping there's some kind of secret to this, too. We don't know anything about a secretive anything that's going to happen in this, but we'll get our hands on this soon. The other thing that was not stated in this or in anything is the release time. We don't know if it's releasing at midnight wherever you are locally, whether it's releasing at like the same time internationally as like a global release, which is, I believe, what they did with the initial release of Sword and Shield. So there's some updates that are happening to the Pokemon Home app and to the game's firmware and the system's firmware that are happening around the same times. It's kind of like 3 things that are happening at once. So some of the predictions are it'll release at 10 a.m. Wednesday morning Eastern time if you live on the East Coast, which would put that at, what was that, 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. Sorry, 5 a.m. Pacific time if you live on the West Coast of the United States, and other various times. The other thing is some people have stated that in Japan, updates are usually released at like 11 p.m. Japan time, which reflects around 10 a.m., 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the United States. So I think we'll see it probably Wednesday morning. It would be great if it came out at midnight. So that way you could just wake up, play it if you want to play it, or experience it through others, whatever. But at the moment, we don't know when it's going to release. But anyways, that's what we've learned today from the first 30 minutes that were revealed to some news outlets over a Zoom call at some point. Some kind of embargo, I'm sure, was lifted today. And I think one of the cool things about this is, since the start of Pokemon Sword and Shield's announcements 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, however long that was, they've been very quiet about the information that they release about the games. They haven't showcased anything major until closer to launch date, and even then they still kind of keep a lot of the cards close to their chests. I've been enjoying that in terms of the discoverability when you're playing the game. You don't know what to expect. I knew far less what to expect in Sword and Shield because of the way they released news about the game up until its release. The only thing that spoiled the release for me was the entire Pokedex and designs were leaked from reviewers that received the review copies and got them out there on the internet, because that's almost inevitable with games, especially in today's era. But what hasn't happened with this DLC is there's no review copies that have gone out, at least none that have been mentioned. Nobody's trying to really leak anything. There's a bunch of rumors and 4chan posts and whatever that claim things, but there's no credibility behind them until you see the actual DLC. So it can't really spoil anything unless you're like, oh, you know what? I read that in the rumors, so that must have been right. But you don't know until the game comes out. So everything is new and everything is fresh. And I think that's what I'm really looking forward to in this DLC, is that I don't know what to expect when I land on the island, other than I'm going to battle my rival. I'm going to get Cubfu, the legendary Pokemon, and I'm going to do the trials and the story. And I'm going to encounter some of the Pokemon that they've showed off, but I don't know all of them yet. So I might be surprised by, I go in and see, oh, wow, this is one of my favorite ones that has come back, and I didn't know it was coming back. So that's kind of cool to feel going into this. So to let you know what my plans are for covering it, if it does release at midnight, I am planning on playing it as soon as it comes out. I am going to get videos up as soon as I can, and we're going to see where this goes, because I think this is the beginning of the future of what Pokemon games will look like. Instead of a slight spin-off game or an enhanced version of the game, we're going to see expansions added to the games. And instead of paying $60 for a whole new game like you had, or well, back on the DS it was $40 for a game, but for example with Sun and Moon you had to pay for Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon separately. Here you're only paying half the price of the Sword and Shield games to get an expansion, which in some ways is kind of cruddy, and in some ways it's a great deal. So hopefully we'll see what it's all about come Wednesday. So thank you for tuning in, and until next time.